Hey gang, I figured we will go over the worksheet. So I'll give you guys the answers. I'll show you how to do each one. All right. Okay. Rounding is a kind of a big deal here. So if our answers are somewhat close together, then rounding is just off, and that's no big deal. So if you're a little off, that's fine. Happens a lot. So we'll write SOHCAHTOA out just as a reminder, and we'll take a look at number one. All right. So if we just look at our triangle, this is opposite and this is adjacent. So we know the hypotenuse. So if I want to find the opposite side first, O and H, that's sine. So sine 23 equals O over H, or B over 10. And then we can bring the 10 over via multiplication. So we get 10 sine 23. And when we solve for that, 3.9. Right? And then we'll do the same thing. We'll look at adjacent hypotenuse now. That's cosine. So it's cosine 23 equals A over 10. Same thing, multiply both sides by 10. 10 cosine 23. And you get 9.2. Right? If you wanted to check your work for this one, the 10 is the hypotenuse, the biggest side of the triangle. 3.9 and 9.2 are both less than 10, so that makes sense. And the other part of a right triangle is the hypotenuse has to be the biggest side, but smaller than the sum of the other two sides. 3.9 plus 9.2 is a little bit bigger than 13. 10 is obviously less than 13, so that works. So that's your way you can check your work. All right. So if we look at B, same idea. All right. So if we want to solve, right, opposite adjacent. So it's literally the same type of problem. So we end up with sine of 40, and then this is going to be opposite over 60. And then this one is going to be cosine 40 equals adjacent over 60. And then we get 60 times the sine of 40, which is 38.5. And then cosine 60 cosine 40, and you get 45.9. All right, last one. So we'll label this hypotenuse, and we'll label this adjacent. All right, so let's do the hypotenuse one, because that's one that's going to be the most difficult one. I'm sorry, this is opposite, not adjacent. That's the adjacent. So we could do cosine 35 opposite, or sorry, adjacent over hypotenuse. So 80 over h, the hypotenuse. Okay, if your denominator is your unknown, you can flip it with the number on the other side. That gets us 80 over cosine 35. And that is equal to the hypotenuse. And when we solve, we get 97.6. And then the height for the opposite side, all right, that's sine 35. And we actually do opposite, which is B, all right, over hypotenuse, which we just found, 97.6. Right, and you get 55.9. You can make this 56 if you wanted to. Right, so that's the first three. All right, we'll look at, number two. The only difference here is same idea, but we're actually looking for the trig function, or looking for the angle instead. So if we look at this first one right here, we don't know what theta is, but we do know that this is a hypotenuse, and we know this is the opposite side. So we know opposite and hypotenuse is sine, so it's sine theta equals opposite over hypotenuse. Sine theta equals 0.5. So then we don't know what the angle is, so we actually use the inverse. So the inverse sine of 0.5, and that's 30 degrees. If we look at this one, this is adjacent, this is opposite. O and A is tangent. So tan theta is opposite over adjacent, 15 over 20. Tan theta is 0.75. So the inverse tan of 0.75, 36.9 degrees. Okay. And then let's take a look at this last one. Okay. This is, oh, it's the same one, opposite, and this is adjacent. So again, it's tan. Okay. So we've got tan theta equals 40 over 60. All right, so tan theta equals 0.66, going on forever. It's 2/3. All right, and then the inverse tan of that is 33.4 degrees. All right, so that's the first page. All right, on the back, all right, let me just, instead of doing them all, we'll just kind of give you what the answers are. All right, so for this first one, we're looking for A. So that's going to be 12 times the cosine of 60. This is 6. Okay. This one, if you're having trouble reading it, okay, we're looking for the opposite, and we have the adjacent. So, right, tan 40 equals opposite over adjacent. So 80 tan 40, 67.1. And then C over here, right, we know the hypotenuse, right? We're looking for the adjacent, so that's going to be cosine. We're looking for the opposite, I apologize, opposite from that. All right, so that's going to be sine. So we have 90 sine 25, and this is 38. All right, and now real quick, we're just looking for angles down here for this last set. All right, so here we have opposite and we have adjacent, so that's inverse tan of opposite over adjacent, 17 divided by 15, all right, 48.5. All right, for this one, we have opposite and we have the hypotenuse, so that's inverse sine. So inverse sine of opposite, 15 divided by hypotenuse, 33.7. And this one is the hypotenuse and the adjacent, that's inverse cosine. All right, and that's going to be 32 divided by 49, and that's 49.2. Okay. If you have any questions, let me know, and have a good night.